The jurors in the George Zimmerman case are 6 everyday people with not-so-everyday task of deciding what happened February 26, 2012. Our coverage of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the trial of George Zimmerman, continues with a look at the all-female panel.
I believe you have some kids, correct?
A lot.
Okay. How many kids do you have?
8.
The first juror to be seated for George Zimmerman's second-degree murder trial is known as B-29. She is reportedly Hispanic or a light-skinned African-American, but she's the only minority. She's in her late 30s and has been married for 10 years and works as a nursing assistant. Juror B-76 is white and in her 50s. She's married and is currently unemployed. Her adult son is an attorney in Seminole County.
It's not criminal, it's foreclosures, bankruptcies, divorce, and contract.
B-37, who is white, is in her late 40s and married, works in a chiropractor's office. She has some concerns about Florida's gun laws.
I think the training that you get with a concealed weapon is not adequate.
Okay.
If you've ever gone to get a concealed weapon permit, it's like, that's it.
Juror B-51, white and in her 60s, is single with no children. She's retired now, but once worked in a call center overseeing 1,200 employees.
You have to listen to all sides, and sometimes you just have to make tough calls.
E6 is white, in her 30s to 40s. She's married and is a stay-at-home mom. Although she was once a victim of violence, she says she can be a fair juror.
It's just a completely different situation, and it really doesn't seem relevant to me at all.
The final juror, E40, is a white woman in her 60s. To talk about this all-female jury, we're joined by former prosecutor Gary Casimir and Jocelyn Cinquino, who is a psychologist, jury consultant, and partner for the firm MMG Consulting. Okay, guys, here we are again. Well, first of all, I got to ask, are you shocked?
A little bit. It's kind of fast, huh?
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of fast and so quick. You know, when we were on the show last week talking about this, we mentioned what would happen. This seems to be taking a long time. And I think what happens is the judge gets tired of things taking too long. And she starts to put her foot down to move things along a little faster. And you can see there were some applications that were denied here. I mean, things that normally would send people back a little bit. I mean, I think there was a comment by one person, one of the jurors who got seated, about thinking Zimmerman might have been a security guard or might have been, or another one who had indicated that they thought Zimmerman, because he was arrested, might have done something wrong. So, you know, it goes both ways, and if they could find biases in either one, and if she wanted to look for a completely impartial, unbiased juror, she might have said, okay, I'm not going to let this person sit for any reason. But instead, she said, well, you know, they could still be fair. So, which means she put her foot down and moved this along.
Let's talk in generalities first, and then we're going to go through some of these jurors and what we know about them so far. Now, first of all, I was reading this morning, and Jose Baez, the famed defense attorney for Casey Anthony, when she was tried for killing her daughter, Kaylee Anthony, said that this is a slam dunk for the defense. I'll start with you here, Jocelyn. Do you agree with that?
You know, there are some really interesting things on this panel based on what we know, which is just scant information at this time, that lead me to put more check marks in their column than for the prosecution.
What are some of those things?
Well, in terms of when you look at women jurors generally and women decision makers, we know that they tend to push back against punishment. So they're going to take a really hard look at what these charges are and then also what the sentence could bring with it. They're very, very deliberative in that process. It seems to me also that there were some challenges that the prosecution tried to make on some of the jurors that were denied, actually. And those things tend to suggest that they thought Trayvon might have played some role in the incident itself, whether he created a false impression or he put himself in a situation that he probably shouldn't have. There are a number of different things like that that just seem to be stacking up in their favor.
All right, let's talk about some of the detail. So juror number B-37, or juror B-37, middle-aged white woman, described the protest in Sanford as rioting. Here's the interesting thing about her, Gary, is that she once owned a concealed weapon permit, the same kind that George Zimmerman had, but had let it lapse. If you know that.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think it's incredible that some of these people got seated. I think the judge was being very aggressive here and trying to get a juror seated. Here, I would have used, as a defense attorney on this case, every method I could to get this woman removed for cause here. The problem is Florida Florida, you know, you have a situation where this part of the message here is guns are good. You know, the concealed weapon laws are good for the state of Florida. Here's someone, you know, the message, and there's another side saying, no, this is bad. Look what happens when you let somebody have a concealed weapon. You put children in harm's way, possibly because that, you know, instead of fighting back with your hands and fists, you fight back with a bullet, which ends, you know, could take somebody's life. So you have this argument taking place in Florida here, and here you have someone who may have already made up their mind about that argument in a lot of ways.
Another one, E6. She was reported as a young woman, but she might be in her 30s or 40s, so I love that they think that's young.
Yeah.
She has 2 children and said that she used this case as an example to her children not to be out late at night. She's been arrested before, but was treated fairly. If you're the prosecution, how do you make that work for you?
Yeah.
When speaking to her.
Right. Well, you know, I think she's it's interesting. I think E6 is more of a troubling witness. She's thinking a lot. There's, you know, you can think there's some benefit to the idea that she's been arrested before for the defense, because the defense is going to say she understands that you could be wrongly arrested and that this case may be a situation where he needs a fair trial and that she can be fair. The other side of it is because, you know, she's been a victim of domestic violence, and here's a violent act that was played upon Trayvon. She may feel the other way. The other interesting thing that she said here that I thought was, you know, very insightful, which is, what do you do, and I think may show some bias, what do you do with someone who's nervous and paranoid and claims self-defense? Is that, you know, can they, in other words, the subconscious self, is that, are you allowed to just be yourself? I'm nervous and scared all the time, so I pulled out my gun and shoot you. You know, there'll be case law, I mean, there'll be law instructions given to her that says, no, you know, it has to be reasonable, your acts has to be reasonable, and you can't be the aggressor, but I think that was very interesting that she brought that up.
Jocelyn, not only are these all women, 5 of them are mothers.
Right.
So how does that play with this panel in terms of how they view evidence, how they listen to witnesses, and then go ahead and throw in at the end how they deliberate and decide on a penalty?
Sure, sure. Yeah, really interesting what I saw from some reports of those inside the courtroom that can give us information on these jurors is that when they were asked what they knew about the case, it wasn't so much that they had made up their mind or they thought one thing or the other, but the way they described Trayvon suggests to me some inclination of at least initial sympathy towards him. They said things like, all I know is a young child was killed, a young boy was shot, you know, a young man was injured or died. Those kinds of very subtle impressions, the way that they come out that way, are suggestive of at least starting out from that perspective. A child was killed here. Whether that impression persists after they see the evidence, that remains to be seen.
You know, it was very interesting, and we decided to monitor Twitter just a little bit to see what the reaction was, what the tweets were after the report of the all-female juror. So I want to tell you about a couple of them. One, Seminole Fan 06 writes, Zimmerman will probably be free by this time next month. And my prediction is that this case, which some expect to last only about a month, will be riveting. Charles M. Blow writes, Zimmerman just needs to go to his place in cell block 6. He was asked to stay in his car. One more response by Ulysses Page writes, you can all agree that 5 of the 6 jurors being white women is very wrong. I bring up, because there's really interesting reaction on social media. The jury is going to be sequestered starting Monday, presumably, but they're exposed to all of this over the weekend. Is there a jeopardy there in terms of, you know, being out in their own devices all weekend long?
Absolutely. I think, you know, part of it is people are talking about you, right? People are making assessment like we're doing now, B6 and B37. So you wonder how you're going to respond to that. Do you change your behavior because somebody thinks you'll act a certain way? Or do you just continue to enforce your behavior as it is? So I think there is an impact. You do not leave your emotions and your past experiences at the door when you walk into a courtroom and become a juror. No. It's just not true.
Yeah, you certainly don't. And that's even in the case what we heard several of these jurors saying when asked about the media is that they either don't pay attention to it because they don't believe it, you can't really trust it, or that it's just not worth their time. So these people might be of the mindset, you know, forget the weekend. I don't care. I'm not looking at these kinds of reports and these things. I'm just going to go in there Monday and do my job.
That might be the rare one, though. And speaking of sequestering, they are going to be sequestered. I wonder if there's any, you know, special circumstance by sequestering 6 women. And not to do any generalities, but women tend to have a whole lot of responsibility, home and otherwise. Yeah. They want to get back home, don't want to be away from their families, as well as, you know, you put 6 women together, and what are you going to get after being together 24/7 for 2 to 4 weeks? weeks.
That's absolutely right.
Well, generally, they all, I mean, in New York, they used to get their own hotel rooms. They didn't pair them up all the time. I don't know what the rule is in Sanford or how they're going to be handling. This is a rare thing, actually, even in Sanford, the sequestration of jurors. I think what does happen, I think, as you pointed out, is, you know, as a result of this, you can't do your regular home stuff. You can't take care of your kids as well. You can't take care of your home. And the idea is, will they want to leave sooner? Will there be a rush to make a decision here? But I think it's going to be more complicated than that. And I think it's just an element to that. Women take their time in making decisions. And I think, you know, that in one instance that, you know, I feel as if it may take longer for them to make a decision here and to get to the point, and they're going to see it out and make it happen.
Yeah, well, what we understand is that women are very cooperative in their approach to decision making, and they entertain perceptions and the perspectives of the people with them making that decision. So we'll see how that plays.
We're going to see. This discussion will continue. All right, Gary, Casimir, Jocelyn Cinquino, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk to you again soon.